Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Influence Show. This is our very first episode, and on this show, we'll basically be discussing essential topics which are very important to the personal and professional development of youth. And today, I have a very amazing guest in the studio. He's a PhD candidate at the University of Nottingham, and he'll be telling us more about himself. Today, we'll actually be talking about education, in this 21st century should be approached in the same way as it has been done several years ago, from 20 or 30 years, or even several years back. And we'll be talking about that and a few other things too as well. So stay tuned and do subscribe to our channel as well, The Influence Show on YouTube. This show is proudly sponsored by Kente Master as well, and Kente Master supplies innovative Kente products across the world for various occasions. So do check out Kente Master as well for all your amazing products. Okay, so now to my guest. He's in the person of Gift Odo. I'm going to let him to actually introduce himself and tell us more about what he does as well. So, Gift, you are highly welcome to the Influence Show.
Thank you for having me. My name is Gift Odo. I'm a PhD student at the University of Nottingham, currently researching robotic teleoperation for nuclear application. In particular, I'm looking at adaptive robotic teleoperation based on human mental workload assessment that would then offer some kind of innovative assistance, particularly systematic robotic assistance to aid teleoperators under critical conditions to perform their jobs effectively, also efficiently, as well as safely. Prior to my PhD, I hold a bachelor's in electrical and electronics engineering, where I did that in the Federal University of Technology, Yola, Nigeria, before proceeding on to do a Master's of Science in the same field at the University of Nottingham. I am very passionate about robotics, but this was not necessarily my childhood and passion. It kind of developed along the journey in my academic career before, maturing into what I now pursue for a PhD. However, I'm interested in also tutoring people, impacting lives in my own way, and also helping people grow both professionally as well as academically. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Very interesting introduction. Definitely packed with a lot of things. But tell us, why did you decide to go into robotics and you're actually pursuing that for your PhD? What's that all about?
Initially, I was not particularly passionate about robotics to the sense of trying to seek it as a career path. And this was because as a kid, I was fiddling a lot with toys, messing around with the circuitry. And at the time, my parents, as well as people around me, would call me engineer. And this was because I was very fond of messing around with basically the technical sides of these toys. And I always thought I was going to be an engineer. But along the line, I thought I would be a petroleum engineer somehow for a particular reason. And I had a bit of a guided journey to the field itself. And my dad thought I would be better off with electrical electronics engineering. Okay. And that was how I found myself in electrical electronics engineering. But at the time, I used to be passionate about energy systems, particularly distributed renewable energy systems. But it wasn't a particularly fixed passion. So as a matter of fact, I never really specialized during my bachelor's because I didn't necessarily know what I wanted to study. Okay. And then I ended up picking virtually every module possible during my bachelor's, giving me a lot of workload, again, because I couldn't really decide my field. Yeah. But while moving on to my master's, I did apply to do electrical electronics engineering as well. However, I didn't specify a discipline. So at the time, I more or less had a bit of inclination to renewable energy systems as the future of power systems. But then when I came to the University of Nottingham, I got exposed to robotics. But a little bit of a backstory. I used to be interested in robotics sometimes as a teenager. And this was particularly when I saw the Asimov robotic exhibition. Asimov is a robot by Honda. And yeah, it was something I kind of clicked with when I first experienced it. And I remember having it as wallpaper for my laptop, being very fond of it. But I never really thought I would pursue it as a discipline. Again, because I didn't know so much about robotics, and I also thought it was maybe too technical per se, and a little bit more, would I say, programming orientated. But then along the line during my master's, when I came and it was time for me to truly specialize, well, I had to choose between maybe do I go for what I thought I wanted, which was renewable energy, or should I try something I used to think could be quite interesting, but maybe didn't really have the exposure for. And then I decided to challenge myself, and that's how I ended up in robotics.
Fantastic, very interesting story. They're very fascinating. To ask this question, if you want to study robotics or you want to go into that field, does it require some kind of special knowledge? Must you be like a nerd or anything of that sort, or would you say it's something that anyone can go into?
That is a good question, and I like the word you use, a nerd. And this is because one of the reasons I was put off robotics during my bachelor's, for example, was because I just thought it was for nerds and maybe people who are particularly socially awkward, again, just to call that loosely. However, yes, now that I'm in the field, I found it to be quite... First of all, it's broader than we think. It's not just technical. There are various aspects to it. We have the human-robot interaction as well as the technical side. We also have the design part, and we have the software side of it as well. And this covers and spans various disciplines. So robotics itself is a cross-disciplinary field. It's not particularly monopolized by engineering. Neither is it also owned by computer scientists as people would normally perceive. So it depends on your background, it depends on your interest, and there are various fields you could choose to take robotics from. For example, if you were more into technical studies, you could try the technical side of robotics engineering. If you were more into software, computer science, the implementations of the system itself. And then if you're also maybe more social in the sense of more into sociology or interactions and social dynamics of people, then you can look at robotic interactions. And there are also key areas, interest areas within that field as well on the robotics.
Okay, that is very insightful, because to me, I felt that you needed to have some knowledge in engineering, some skills and stuff to really go into robotics. But that is eye-opening to mention that there are actually different aspects of it, design and others. And I mean, people with different skills, different backgrounds could actually venture into it. So maybe I should actually think of perhaps venturing into that. All right, today we are going to talk about education, and we're just trying to see in terms of education what it really means, especially in the 21st century. So if I should ask you, what does it mean to be educated in this 21st century? Does it mean the same today as it meant maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago? What would you say?
I think that's a deep question, but there is no easy answer to it. But for the sake of time, if I was to answer it, I would say no, it doesn't necessarily mean the same. Again, this is because the world changes and changes very quickly. The expectations of society 20 years ago is not exactly the same as what we expect today. More importantly as well, the industrial space as well has changed. We get groundbreaking innovations every now and then, and with it comes requirements, expectations. And the way we have been trained some years ago, unfortunately, is technically the same way we're being trained today, in the sense that curriculums hardly change. But if you think about it, sometimes you will need to do some of the work yourself. So in the past, it perhaps required you to just go to school, get a degree, and then you would be more or less safe. But in this current day and age, you also need to augment that classroom education with other practical skills, which, depending on where you're educated and how you're educated, you may or may not have.
Okay. Great, very great points there in terms of how you should approach education, especially talking about the fact that now the skills which are needed in the industry and all have changed over time. Now, some people would say, of course, we have people who haven't even been to school, and I'm talking about formal education here. Some people have not been to school, but they are doing very well. They are successful, and also is education really necessary, especially formal education? Is it really needed? Do you necessarily have to go to school to actually become successful today? Is it needed at all?
My answer to this will be a little biased, again, because I'm doing a PhD.
Okay.
But again, if I assess the society, I would say it depends on the context. It depends also on what you define as success or what's the word? Was it success?
Yeah, to be successful. Yeah.
So how you define success also matters.
Okay.
Financially, maybe not. We have entrepreneurs who perhaps never really had a formal education. If you want to look at success as a whole, then I would say education is necessary. And this is because while you could, in a way, succeed in a field, but you stand to gain more in that field if you are formally educated. And the problem with people these days is they think education is all about going to school, getting a degree, and then remembering what you're taught. And then that kind of notion actually underscores the ignorance of people. Instead, I believe education actually fashions your reasoning. It fashions how you see the world. It fashions how you see problems. And it's not necessarily remembering what you did, to pass, but how you applied your knowledge, your resources, and the limitations and constraints, during your learning period to achieve some of those successes or, like I say, tackle some of those problems. So having that kind of exposure, particularly with formal education, gives you an edge to people or against people who haven't been formally educated in terms of your reasoning, in terms of your approach, also in terms of how you handle various expectations in the workplace. So you would, again, maybe be better off having to be formally educated.
Very great. Thank you. I really like the answer you gave, talking about the fact that it actually deepens your knowledge in that field, and having that education would help you be more successful. Again, you also talked about the definition of success and the fact that it doesn't mean the same to different people. And some may be looking at finances, but others may look at other things. And so that buttresses the point that education is still important. And I would even use myself as an example, because for my first degree, I did biological science. That is back in Ghana, the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And afterwards, I went into business. But I started business more from the street. I didn't study business. I started it from the street, went to a business incubator and all that. So I had to learn certain things on my own. But then later on, coming to study my master's in entrepreneurship, innovation, and management here, I actually got to learn certain key things which have been very useful, I would say, in my business compared to when I was just doing it on my own, just learning on my own and all that. So I really do get the point that, yes, you might not necessarily need a formal education to do certain things or even to be successful in certain ways, but it also really helps, especially in solidifying your knowledge in that field. Of course, getting to meet certain key people too as well as you study and go along. And also the point you mentioned, saying that it is not necessarily about remembering things, but how best you could apply some of that knowledge to as well. That is really important. Thank you for those key points. Now, moving on, with all that being said, how do you think we should then approach education or formal education? What do you think should be the approach in today's world? Right from, let's say, when you're even growing up and all. If you had children today, for example, you want to educate them, looking at how things have changed, looking at the industries and all that, how would you approach that? Or what do you think might be the best way in your point of view?
Okay. It all depends on, again, the society. In some societies, for example, education means, you have to go to school, let's say 8 a.m., return 2 p.m., and you're done for the day. And you repeat that cycle Monday to Friday, and then somehow you claim to have been educated. But actually, education is learning, but learning so that you could apply, which means learning never stops. You have to also have an open mind to do some of the work on your own. So it would be learning within the four walls of a classroom, but also learning with some of the resources around you also as a person. And this means, you have to do a little bit of an extra work to just going to school and, writing the formal exams and all that stuff. No, you would essentially need to also develop yourself outside the classroom. This could also be in terms of maybe adding more knowledge to yourself, because again, you wouldn't get all the knowledge you really need in the classroom. It could also mean expanding your horizon, trying to also see to maybe contrast what you think you have learned in the classroom. Yeah. This, again, having that contrasting view of various disciplines and various concepts solidifies your knowledge. It gives you a broader horizon to have a better way of understanding concepts and having this wider lens to seeing a problem. And I think, in my opinion, that should be the approach taken towards learning, in the sense that more of the work is actually on you as the student and really not your teacher. You don't expect everything to be provided for you. It's also remotely impossible to get that done as well. So education means learning, and in my opinion, learning should never stop.
Okay, great. Do you think that parents should let their kids decide what they want to study, or how should that be done?
I have an unorthodox answer to that, unfortunately, but short answer, yes. Parents should influence what their kids study. This is from my personal experience anyway, and this is because I am very grateful to my parents, for guiding me to the field I'm in today. Let alone, I wouldn't have been in electrical electronics engineering. Okay. And I'm not sure I would have fared well in that particular discipline I initially tried to pursue. Again, as a parent, you know your kid, especially, you know their aptitude. You see them, you observe them, and rather than having that sentiment, if you try to see them in a more objective way, then you could tell what their aptitudes are. And sometimes this aptitude might not be very apparent to the kid, especially at an early age. Yeah. So if you let them decide, they might make a mess of their choices, and this could impact them in the future. However, you don't want to force a discipline on a kid, but you can guide them, or more or less show them what you think they are capable of. Giving them that exposure, or giving them that nudge, or allowing them to see things from a different perspective based on your observation of them could help them make a guided judgment of their path. And fantastic. I benefited from this myself. Yeah,
I like the point you mentioned about guidance, because, some parents actually do force. So, hey, you need to be a medical doctor, and you're going to be a medical doctor, and you don't have any choice about that. You're going to be a lawyer and things like that. But I think that if it's about guidance, that is actually good. So, because of course you may know better, being able to guide them in certain fields and observing them, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, as you mentioned earlier. But I believe that, of course, being able to let your kids explore different areas and then actually now seeing where they are good at and guiding them to actually choose that might definitely be a good way to go around it. So thank you for that. Okay, now moving on. So we are in the era of AI, robotics, and all that, among others. In your opinion, you are studying a PhD in that area. How does the future look like? Should we start being scared? I've watched Kai Cenat's live streams. I believe you've also seen that he has a robot in the house, and all that. Kim Kardashian has a robot now as well. Elon Musk doing a lot in that area. How's the future looking like? What should we begin to think about in terms of robotics, AI, and stuff?
The future is promising. The future is interesting. Again, it comes with some expectations as well. This is because the future is heavily dependent on the stage we are on in industrialization. And at the moment, starting about 5 years ago, we have entered a new era of industrialization. This is Industry 5.0, essentially industry where we now try to combine humans with automated systems, trying to get them to understand each other and work safely and together. Well, in terms of robotics and AI, I think we have them as tools. And a lot of people actually fret at the moment, thinking, no, this would be the end of mankind, humankind, as the case may be. Not really. It's a tool. It's here to serve us, and we just need to know and actually accept it as a tool. First of all, if you deal with your perception of it, then you have tackled most of the problem. And then you need to then, improve yourself, develop your skills to be able to use these systems.
Thank you very much for that answer, because sometimes we look at all these things and we're like, hey, are robots going to take over the world? Should we be scared of them and all that? And it's quite mind-boggling, but I guess we'll just see how it's going to go. And I believe that we just have to keep developing ourselves. Of course, making sure that we are abreast with some of these changes. So in terms of using AI, for example, there's no two ways about that. You just have to see how you can apply it to your work. In education, it's already there. Students are using it. And so lecturers would need to see how they can adapt to fit some of the assessments and stuff into that as well, making sure that students are using it responsibly. I believe you can't do away with it. It's already there. It's here to stay. But it's about using it responsibly. It's about we also knowing how to actually use that AI, whether in business or whatever field that we find ourselves in. And yes, I believe that it's just on us to embrace these changes and then develop with it. Okay, once again, so the Influence Show is brought to you by Kente Master, and you can click the link in our bio to order your products. And we have wonderful products, Kente products, as you can see here. What we are putting on. So these are handmade by weavers in Ghana, and every sale goes to support these weavers. So do check out Kente Master for all your lovely Kente products for various occasions and various celebrations too, as well, especially graduations. Moving on, so you're starting a foundation called Robotics Africa. Can you tell us about this? What is this all about, and what made you to think of starting it?
The name of the foundation is Robotics Africa.
Okay.
Basically exploring the role of robotics to uplift in Africa innovatively as well as socially. Again, the journey behind that is based on my own experience and my own life. It's usually, I'll take that again. The journey is based on my experience and my journey into the field. And this is because, as I mentioned earlier, I never really thought I would be into robotics. Again, I thought it was nerdy. I had the least exposure to it. So I never really imagined it. And you don't know what you don't know. If you have not experienced something, then you don't know if you would like it or not. You don't know how well you will fare into it. And more importantly, having not experienced something essentially means you don't aspire towards it. So I was lucky to have been exposed to it. Sometime during my master's, I saw some of these robotic platforms, and it sparked some interest in me. And I've been very grateful to myself for not, chickening out and pursuing the field. It's a very promising field, and I do really enjoy it. And so I thought I should also give the opportunity to a few other people, particularly back in Nigeria and in Africa as a continent. Where sometimes we do have this technical exposure. We go to school, we have, in a way, some of these technical skills, but the exposure to apply this field is not there. So we don't necessarily think about, how we could improve our community innovatively using some of these particular tools or platforms such as robotics or other kind of innovative systems being developed. So I thought maybe if I had a way of creating awareness, in a fashion that people could see these robotic platforms, interact with it, and by interacting with it, spark some kind of conversation between themselves, or more importantly, also inspire them to maybe see various applications of some of these platforms to their lives and to their communities. I believe we could raise our involvement in the field, and by extension also lead innovation and ultimately contribute to the global pool of robotics, engineering, STEM in general, such that we tackle global issues, but not just in a global setting, also in a more specialized way that could be directly applicable to some of the unique challenges we face in Africa. And unfortunately, this is a very big gap in the technical pool, where, yes, devices are being developed every day, technology is being spawned out every day, but the test cases of these systems are mostly based on Western data sets. And we have a limited pool within this data set, which means sometimes when we try to adopt these technologies and these platforms, they don't really fit our lifestyle, they don't fit our society, they don't fit our way of life in general. So having a way to essentially get people to think about this from their own community could then spark this, again, as I mentioned, debates, but more importantly, it could spark interest. It could inspire people to then have some kind of critical thoughts of these systems, of these platforms, and in general, innovation. And this is, again, not to convert everyone into a technical nerd. Nope. It's to also look at it from all the other holistic sides of it, in terms of the social aspect of these platforms, in terms of the environmental side of this platform, as well as the economic side as well, that also impact us as a continent. And indeed, the world is moving very fast, and we need to really catch up. And that's what I'm trying to do in my own little way.
Fantastic. Thank you. That sounds really, really interesting. And I'm happy to really hear that, because I believe that, Africa definitely has a lot of potential. It's just about getting the right support, the right exposure, especially to our students back in Africa. And I believe we can do amazing things, because I know in Ghana, even high school students have been going to this robotics championship, which is like a global one, and they've actually won some of those championships, okay, even with the little exposure that they have. So I believe that this definitely can become something really, really great. But to just ask you, what is the vision? What does it look like? Let's say in the next 10 years, for example, what would you look at achieving with this foundation that you are starting?
The big vision really is to influence the general educational landscape of Africa, in the sense that we need to catch up, we need to update, and we need to adapt. If you look at the way learning is being deployed in the continent, you would understand that a lot of work needs to be done in terms of meeting up with best practices, and more importantly, meeting up to best standards or global standards. So I think the long-term vision of my foundation, what I'm very convinced about, is that we could generally spark this conversation that would then lead to some innovative legislation that then gets more people involved, but more importantly, gets more people interested in looking at technology, innovation as a whole. Technology is the backbone of every economy. And by doing this, I'm hoping policies would maybe be driven through the kind of discussion we aim to have. Curriculum could be impacted, updated, and in general, people's life could be transformed to then contribute to the technological sphere of Africa, which would then uplift the continent.
Wonderful. That is definitely a big vision, and I wish you the very best in that.
Thank you.
Can't wait to see all the wonderful things that you are going to do.
Thank you.
But if someone wants to get involved, how do they get involved with your project?
The project is just starting. Currently, we're still in the phase of getting things up and running. It's still capital intensive. Trying to get some of these robotic platforms as well is not very easy. So at the moment, if you want to get involved, please just reach out to me on LinkedIn. My name is Gift Odo. I believe the name will be displayed.
Yes,
if you search me on LinkedIn, you will easily find me. Please drop me a message, and I would see how well we could work together.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Gift, for being on the Influence Show today, where today we've been talking about education and what it actually means in the 21st century. So what would you say would be your final words to wrap up this topic of approaching education today, making sure that you are successful? To students, for example, who are currently in the university, studying towards various degrees, what would you say to these students in terms of their approach towards their career development and succeeding in our current world today? Interesting.
Thank you for the opportunity to share this, but I'm going to come in a very strong, opinionated approach. I believe students should be more flexible. And when I say flexible, I mean, yes, you may have a particular passion or you may have a particular dream, but remember, the world is not waiting for you. The world is growing. And more importantly, the world is changing. And the only thing constant in the world at the moment is change itself. So that field or that particular interest you had 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, may not necessarily be existent 2 years later, 10 years later. So try to think ahead and try to see, what the future holds for your particular vision, for your particular ambition, and see how well you can equip yourself ahead of time so that you're not caught unawares. For example, with the current heat about AI and generative AI in general, people think it's here to displace a lot of jobs, but in reality, it's here as a tool to make you be better, to make you more efficient. And if you have not really updated your skills to know how to use these platforms, in regards to your discipline, it's most like excuse me, tongue twist. It would most likely, take over your position, take over your job, and it will displace you. And that's what happens. So if you remain stagnant, then you risk losing out. So please try to be adaptive, try to understand, and try to perceive the world around you. But more importantly, have vision for the future and plan ahead, because this would then mean that you are thinking ahead and you're not just naively looking at the present. And that would mean as well that, you know exactly what to do to make sure you remain relevant should the worst happen.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Very, very insightful. And thanks for sharing all the wonderful knowledge today on the show. It has really been insightful. I like the fact that you ended with talking about students being flexible, but of course, again, putting that effort into their development to be able to cope with what is happening in the world today. I would also add that it is important for you to be intentional, because if you really decide that this is what you want to pursue, this is how I want my future to be like, you start asking the right questions, and then that will lead to the right places. But of course, be aware of the current trends of what is happening and all of that ChatGPT, robotics, everything that's going on around, making sure that we are all abreast with that, so that you don't just pursue your degree, you go out and then you are limited to that. I believe that education should go beyond the classroom. It's not confined within the classroom. It should go beyond the classroom. Make the world your classroom, actually. And I think that is actually a good way for you to educate yourself and to be able to fit in and thrive in the world today. So once again, the Influence Show is brought to you by Kente Master, and Kente Master supplies amazing Kente products across the world, graduation scarves for your graduation, bags and other key products. So feel free to check out the website and order your amazing Kente products. In our next episode, we'll be talking about creative arts, how you can get into the creative arts industry. If you're a dancer, singer, you're a painter, anything of that sort, or you're interested in that, how can you get into that space? How can you break into that space? How can you monetize your talents and skills? And how do you even discover those talents and skills? That is what we're talking about in the next episode of The Influence Show. So make sure to subscribe to our channel and then stay tuned for that. Once again, thank you so much for joining today's episode of The Influence Show. Catch you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.